Oh, right. Well, I'm really glad everybody tuned into another show, The Universe Inside Our Mind, and this is Dr. David Jubb, and we've got Lukey here recording, and we've got Patrice, and we're really putting full pictures here behind everything. But this story about Atlanteans, America, and the Indians, they read about shiny bones being dug up. Sort of the minerals and things, sort of bones of the earth, shiny bones. But this was a time gone by, of a story, of course. But this is really also about our own shining power that we have remained within us, more as a that we have here in North, with a heritage which is very amazing. It's Native American. But it's sort of a way for us to be able to clear away what isn't and put more what is. This is our identity more, and this is given to us more in story today, and in these shows that we're doing all about Atlantis and the digging up of shiny bones and North America. But and we're going to talk a little bit about the 4 suns that we've passed through, this being the 5th sun, and then what's to come as a result of all of this. But it's really a story more of an allowing and allowedness, and for ourselves to really be able to achieve more sort of a balancedness in ourselves. But, you and I, we're sort of presenting ourselves more nobody rather than somebody, and this is the age for the Aquarian age, But anyway, I guess the quest for this really, this holy dirt sort of really has been combined a lot, because it's amazing that you can go to places like Lourdes and you can be received of a substance which really does have an energy within it, which is no question about it. It is really assists to help heal people up. Yeah. But this life colloid and the holy dirt really is a substance such as this. But, any substance which we really have, which has sort of mostly remained above dry land, and has, but at one point certainly was underwater and has had a Besnick existence, being at the bottom of the sea, for instance, thrust up as a continent and an island. But you see, these are the sorts of things which have been going on. I've got someone pulling me continuously in on the phone. Can you hear that beeping? Oh, okay. I've got a beeping on my end a bit, so I'll just keep going. It's amazing. But anyway, our continents have sort of risen and sunk into the sea, Lukey. And so that's really interesting. But new ones have risen up out of the bosom of the earth, and then liquid sort of really causes plates to float a little bit and subduction to occur with the plate. And Lemuria really is recognised by Lemuroid geography, and plant and flora analysis and species and things. And you can link things also quite fairly scientifically through times gone by and the ages. Certainly the platypus and the koala, and then you've got Lemuroid animals like the lemurs in Madagascar. But there was a time when Ethiopia, certainly in Madagascar, were totally connected, and that goes back sort of 50,000 years. But we've got places on the earth which some of these nadir points have remained where canopies existed for the longest time, and you've got some earth remained where you've got organisms which are very, very old. But the biggest organism, is about 2,200 hectares in size in Oregon, and that's about 600 million years old. You've got some places on the earth which has been able to be remained above, yeah, and other places which really have sunk, but you've got organisms which really are bringing in nutrients and sensing the environment. Certainly, you've got an internet network there going on, in Oregon with this beautiful life form, which is one of the largest life forms on the Earth. But anyway, that's another story. But in the Southern Hemisphere, you've got three eras existing, sort of Pangea, where everything is just one supercontinent, and then you've got Mu, where things are breaking up and the Earth is growing, and subduction, and you've got lakes extending into more larger lakes because you've got celestial bombardment and things going on. But Mu then extends into Lemuria, and then that goes into Atlantis and Atlantic times. And our program really is more about Atlantis, but we could be talking just a little bit about things because you can get a bit more of a perspective of everything. Yeah, about this present civilization, where we've come from. But all it's built from beautiful cities of the past, of course, which is now washed away and hidden sort of certainly under land and water. And a lot of this sort of has been discovered, but we've covered some of this, and I'm just sort of tracking a bit just to keep us on track where we are. But Mu was very large, and it last finished around about 50,000 years ago. A lot of it was sunk, but pieces of it existed up until recent times more. But in the Pacific, Mu was a very ancient time, was the Garden of Eden, and the Californian coast, was a connectedness there. But the coastline back then certainly is underwater now. But beautiful underwater stone statues, as we've said, of the Mohawk tradition and of Atlantis, and these gorgeous, beautiful people with mesomorphic bodies and quite very athletic prowess in relationship to, just sort of normal people, really. They were very athletic. But you've got a beautiful writing back then, and you've got a lot of things there which is sort of topsy-turvy. You've got stuff on top and things on the bottom which debunks Darwin, Darwin really is from 1809 to 1882, but you've got fossils and things, and you've got continental and Earth expansion and scientific evidence today that totally debunks Darwin and Hegel, and evidence shows certainly that a lot of that was just put because of commercialism and to cause people to feel other than their sovereignty within themselves as original people. You're an original, certainly. But Lemuria, 5,000 miles long back then, 3,000 miles wide, it's really inhabitants of Atlantis fled as Lemuria slowly disappeared also. But that was all connecting Australia and India and Africa and England, which you could walk all the way around there at one point there, certainly. But all the animals roamed certainly in Pangea's time. But once the water was deposited 65 million years ago as it began to rain and the oceans filled up, you've got regions that were connected, certainly like the Californian coast. But you've got Fiji and Hawaii and Easter Islands. You've got submerged cities there, which is the naval Easter Island, where you've got these gorgeous red, white, and black stone, which the Atlanteans loved to build with. But anyway, you've got Cambat, you could look up, of course, and you've got things going on in the sea now, of course, flooded over. We go back beyond 10,000 years, 8,498 BC, Earth went through a bit of a shocker, with that asteroid hitting, which we've talked about. And then you've got Yonaguni Island in the Pacific, which a lot more water has been rained and the Earth's been tilted a little bit. And you've got civilization amazing up in North Korea and South Korea area there, which is yet to be come sort of known more. But Atlanteans definitely mined quite heavily minerals and things in that area. But Yonaguni Island in the Pacific is also, and the Caribbean, all sort of connected one huge, beautiful Atlantean civilization back in this time of the Americas we're going to be talking about during our program. But Dorka and certainly Sodom and Gomorrah and Tikrit in Turkey, these are cities going back before 12,000 years, long before this time which we're talking about now. The Rockies have shells on top, mate, certainly 10,000 years old. Earth's reformation really every 600,000 years. It's gone through certainly a radical polar shift, and that is the longest time frame there ever could be between cycles, which that's a cycle which is the longest cycle that's been. It could be explained a lot actually by the Stargate system that's been set up by Atlanteans to hold the Earth in a protective manner that it would shield itself in times of electromagnetic crisis like this, and be able to line itself up so that a lot of this would fall into the Pacific. But anyway, who knows, we might get to that. But years ago, of course, we had a very radical, very deep insight. But we're long overdue, for this insight to be returned to us. And certainly the cycles of time upon us, with this great crossing that's going on. But you and I are sort of living in the fifth sun. This is the sun of earthquakes. There's been 4 major catastrophes in the past, and certainly new asteroid threats are imminent. A 1.2 kilometre rock, smaller, of course, than what's slammed into Jupiter that we witnessed, but in 2004M is being located, and that's a potential impact in 2014. Little information, of course, is sometimes put and given, but it could be back page somewhere because people have properties, and they don't want to have their properties lose any value. But February 2009, of course, we saw a Shoemaker-Jupiter collision, and much was learned really. Large pieces of rock just took several days afterward to also impact and come back down and slam in. We saw the impact of that. But like Chitko in the Tunguska, Siberia area was one of the most recent, air explosions, and what effect sort of nuclear-like sort of effects these air explosions have. But you've got under 50 grams of rock sort of recovered, on a regular basis, Lukey. And you've got meteorites crashing September 21st, 2007 in Peru. This is a beautiful story that people could love to track. But what you've got coming in mostly is 10 to 70 kilometres per second. And so a lot of that sort of burns up. But you've got the Beringia crater right there in Arizona. And that also correlates that crater with a very huge crater we've got in Australia too, mate. But anyway, those come in at about 11 kilometres per second, fairly big rocks, but fairly recent too, only 50,000 years ago. But if we're moving more into the time frame we were talking about here, but you've got 65 million years ago, certainly 70% of life is all sort of wiped out. You've got the Chicxulub, that's 180 kilometre crash. You've got, it's caused it to rain and flood all over, and it raised all the tsunamis several miles high during that period of time, which they raised around the Earth and created lots of layers, which Eagle and Darwin couldn't sort of really put into their equation at all. But that water really gradually has filled up the sea as we know it today, and part of all of this is sort of something which really should be put into the equation. It's sort of something which really is wasn't put into the equation of time being constant for Darwin and Hegel, which time hasn't been constant, but certainly vegetation and growth of bogs and things. You've got iridium deposits and stuff. You've got ash layers. You've got specific layers that confirm 30 ancient, certainly radioactive sites, I think, which we've mentioned now in our program. But you've got, again, that's recorded in 2193 BC and then again 1628 BC. You've got the heavens darkening and temperature changing radically and plummeting, and you've got four global catastrophes, which we can talk about. But let's go back to the last one we could remember, because the big one that occurred was such an electromagnetic energy that it just really did gut lots of people's brains, People were just left standing or sitting where they were listening or doing what they needed to be doing, and as it went by, people just were left to pee in their pants, really. So not much memory was after that. That was the big one. But the ones that have happened since on the survivors and things have gone on, and this is the story which we're telling. But 3100 BC, mate, Earth gets a big shocker, like a woofer that happened to us, which can be explained. Hopefully we might be able to even get to this in our program, but we're doing 28-minute shows, so well, let's see. But then you've got, if we can go through this, these four suns at least. You've got 3100 BC, right, which we'll talk a little bit about, and you've got 2200 BC. You've got a shocker hitting us here in North America and Atlantean. You've got 1600 BC, something happening again, a bit like that, and then in 1200 BC. So you've got these four suns, and they are correlated today with the calendars of the Vedic text, as well as the Mayans and these calendars and things. But the Indian subcontinent calendar, certainly in the Mayan calendars, synchronise, and these dates are quite certainly catastrophic conditions which have occurred on the Earth, and it'd be just crazy just to be dismissed of that as you would if you followed Darwin and Hegel. But comet, Proto-Enki in 3113 BC, and then you've got 2193 BC, and you've got Proto-Enki and Oli Jato, and you've got Hale Bob converging, and they have created bloody havoc, I'm telling you. But they're slowly being knocked out and sort of made a bit smaller through attrition over time. But then in 1628 BC, and we're going to be talking a little bit about this in our program, Atlantean times and shiny bones being dug up here in North America. You've got 1628 BC, Oli Jato and Proto-Ink, knocking us around. And then you've got 1198 BC, Oli Jato and Proto-Ink, creating enormous flooding and climate change. Yeah. So these sort of really create these ages, you know. Are you there, Lukey? Certainly they have the force of nuclear bombs, way more than that. It's unbelievable, of course, you know, and there's lots of evidence to show of this too. But copper, really millions of tons, I mean millions of tons, was mined from the Great Lakes shore during this time frame we're talking about. And the areas of the United States going back to begin, you know, I mean, of course, you've got the Big Bang hitting Atlantis, 8,498 BC. It takes a couple thousand years, mate. You know, you've got a bit of lot of ash and stuff to clear up there, and 2,000 years pass, and then everything sort of warms up too, you know, because the warm sea currents warm everything up there. But around 7,000 years ago, 5,000 BC, you've got copper frenzies getting going, you know. This is Atlanteans getting underway again. And then our memory, where we are in this story, where we're talking about the first sun, 3,500 BC, that's 5,000 years ago, if you add on the 2,000 years of AD. But, you know, these ages and frenzies sort of finished abruptly and then and continued on, and then eventually, of course, 1,100 BC, because of this asteroid calamity, of course, you've got Poverty Point also being abandoned, and then this is the New York City of the Americas and the world back then, being a huge civilization, way beyond, you know, what's on the ground now, but not anything like what existed in Atlantis. But everything else was just a bit of a trading outpost, you know what I mean? But you've got Indian trading cities, you've got right there, but only you've got Poverty Point being the major spot. But that Indians and people were moving things through the Great Lakes area. You've got copper, tin, and zinc stone, sort of like float stone, sort of being picked up and traded and brought in. The Indians call two children called these shiny bones. But all was taken and applied, you know, in Atlantis, mate. You know, they were making extremely powerful metals, very sophisticated, hard and purified mixes of copper and alloys, and called aurichalcum. This aurichalcum is amongst the most prized metals, but of its untarnishedness, and they had great metal smithing. But you've got also the stone henge site being abandoned about this same time, of course. And so then from 5,000 BCE, which we're talking about, to 1,100 BC, where everything gets abandoned, like what we just said then, you've got a time frame here of a big copper frenzy going on in the world. Atlantis was sunk by asteroid impact in 8,498 BC, and after that you've got 2,000 years passing just to make sure you've got the story clear. You've got a nuclear winter going on in that 2,000 years, and you've got us as its survivors establishing sort of outcrops. Things. But you've got then things getting going again, and prosperity and lucrativeness happening in a currency where you can clearly see copper being dug, and then certainly other precious metals also we could talk about. But this is the story of Atlantis beginning around 5,000 and talking about the copper. But we eventually can talk about Mu and Lemuria, and then some of the precious metals, certainly some of the very, very amazing elements like platinum and things, being taken out of the area around where New Guinea is. But that's another story and goes back even further. But we're concentrating our time on these four suns, and to get through this, which is a native story here, given to us and passed on orally, that came through Cloud 2 children. But completely sort of, you've got this time frame, and then certainly scientifically you can see things sort of abruptly finish around 1100 BC. You've got the Toltecs talking of this era being we're in now, since then, the fifth sun. And this has been the sun, they call the sun of earthquake. Yet before this era, you've got a watery sun, and before that a sun of fire, and then a sun of wind, and before that a sun of water. And going back, you've got Atlantis sinking by asteroid impact, 8,498 BC. So you've got these four ages and types of suns that Earth and Atlanteans have gone through, that we're talking about right now, that's occurred here, and we have evidence of this in America, and that this is really part of the oral tradition given to us through the Toltecs. Yeah, but the pyramid builders for mining in America and the currency trade was really being managed by the same people, Lukey. Some people, mate, who really built, and they were lifting really large stones, mate, Are you with us, mate? I can barely hear you. But anyway, large stones of megalithic structure for their time, gone by, really. But you've got similar tools as today, mate. You've got wrenches and sockets and spark plugs and geodes, and you've got pieces of equipment to navigate and things. But you could find what you found, you could put it on a billiard table, honestly, mate. It's not much, you know what I mean? But estimated 750 million pounds of copper certainly went to fuel the copper trading frenzy that was going on in England and Europe around this same time. Atlanteans monopolised trading, and auric alchem is this beautiful pure grade copper that they use. But Atlas and Atlantean chieftains, and Atlantis is the chief mountain that's actually really was a very beautiful, large, huge volcano. Atlanteans navigated transatlantic crossings up for thousands of years before 8,498 BC. And then also from around 3,500 BC, we see really quite a bit of activity going in the seas. We see copper currency till 1,100 BC, and all during this time. But after that, you see an abrupt end, which we can talk about because, of course, the celestial heavens and the impact it had knocking us around back then. But it created the sun we have today, which is the fifth sun. But the Toltecs talk of us really living now in this fifth sun, and these four epochs going back to 3,500 BC from a time of rememberedness of social order, that we could easily open up to in oral story, and that this sort of becomes closer to us as we become aware now more of putting everything together, and not just having a localized story told, but something more global. But you've got to correlate these four major epochs of cosmic bombardment since, and then these major destructions of Atlantis, of course, and asteroid impact, going back to 8,498 BC, which was one major collapse of Atlantis, and then the slow collapse of what was left of it as it rebuilt itself, finally to finish in 1100 BC. You've got 5,000 years ago, that's 3,500 BC, basically. The Bronze Age is really coming and flourishing, and you've got copper being mined, to fuel this. People might wonder where it all went, but if you know about Atlantis, which we could take you underwater to show you where it was, but I've spent a lot of time putting all of this together and gone to lots of these beautiful sacred places to get the Akashic records. But you've got the nearest, also to Europe, 6,000 years ago. You've got the Atlas mountain of Mount A, and being part of the alphabet, being about a house or provision, a house. It rises up out of a sea. It's a flat, and it just comes straight up. That's the oral tradition of A, and the V is really victory, and that comes about from Nibiru. But it's an accurate rendition, really remembered story since about 5,000 years ago about Nibiru, which is a symbol, which is something which the natives are aware of, which is like a V, which has got orange and red and black coming out of it. But these are the symbols and colours of Atlantis, Atlantean. But a whole species of humans and civilization is exterminated by ancient warfare, certainly, because people sort of fall to decrepitness and controlledness and lizard brainness, really. But you've got that Atlanteans having to defend themselves as well, and you've got natural disaster. But then during times of that, you've got 500 years, sometimes that's happened, of dark ages where everything's obliterated, and even consciousness, you've got a rudderless sort of memory. But the Indians orally really have kept things as an oral tradition, but that there was a war going on, certainly, is told to us between the Atlanteans and the non-Atlanteans in the midst of these huge, gigantic floods occurring too. But very few escape from, but this story is being spoken and shared with you. The recovered technology, of course, and achievements of Atlanteans is way beyond anything that regular people could be aware of. But the scientific and astronomical and agricultural scientific excellence is way beyond advanced science and insight today. But we could talk about when finally Ireland was settled in some of these areas. But you've got a very few Atlanteans survived the wars and the calamities, but you've got some again sort of rebuilt all the way back from rubble and that. And then got three large, huge, major catastrophes packed beyond 3,500 BC, and this 500 years of dark ages. You've got until 1,200 BC, 1,100 BC, finally everything is done for. 100 years after that, Atlantis is really finally destroyed, forever. And so, it's just very interesting because you've got Plato putting bits of this together, certainly, but you've got human races of the past and also of the present. You've got the Florenzis, very small little people. You've got little one blown out of a rock, which was only about 1 foot high, fully grown person in Wyoming. You've got certainly soft tissue of blood from dinosaur bones, from Tyrannosaurus rex, which has been examined, which we can show you. Look at this. You've you could see you've got a honeycomb structure underneath you where you are, and you can imagine that any giant woofer blast that can rock and turn and shake the earth ever more. You've got cities like the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Homer. But you've got people concerned today about traffic, you see, and making sure that something gets fed, which is something never would, but you've got everything having to be just mechanically done, you know, and that is a very serious 440, which there is no natural or cyclical time that occurs. But the city of Iliad and Odyssey in the story of Homer and is about this and consciousness, which we could talk about at some point perhaps, and how consciousness is evolved to where we are. But the Iliad and the Trojan Wars and things and the capitals of all these have been found, and also extensive tracks connecting the Queen of Sheba all the way down to South Africa and then Madagascar. But you've got in 3100 BC a series of comets that are hitting and wiping everything out, which is part of this sort of sun, this first sun that's after that we're talking about, the major one that wiped Atlantis out. And then you've got a major one coming, which is this 3100 BC impacts and things, which fire from the heavens and seismic violence really from the sky and the sea, and the earth has just sort of crashed in. You've got tsunamis raging and flooding, and rain then raise all, you see. And this subduction and earth looks fairly new. You've got some parts, of course, surviving, which you can see cities and even strata of the earth, the terraced and that. But you've got a time during this time of mass migration, and you've got people with great deep wisdom just migrating to other places. And you've got free energy, which they understand, happening in all these little places and things. You've got Egypt sort of rising up, and Atlanteans being involved in this and burying the ships there, which were used to create, and then alongside the pyramids. You've got India, Morocco, and England all under Atlantean management. You've got people surviving these earthquakes and rebuilding from the rubble and volcanic activity. You've got copper trade going on, mate. You've got it going on right here in America, and you've got the chiefdoms going on, you know, which is just the most deep, major spiritual insight here. Aboriginals no longer. You've got originals we're talking about. This is you and I. These are originals. You are an original of this land, which is a flourishness that goes back, you know, till about 1200 BC. And certainly Kenwick man is an original we're talking about. You've got celestial sufferedness, also sort of in between, you know what I mean? But yeah, you've got like peace and harmony sort of going on as well, you know, during these ages. I think I'll just do a little bit more and we'll take a small break here. But you've got copper having been found in Lake Michigan shoreline. And this is a boon to Atlanteans. And you've got, after this, natural calamities, and the Atlanteans, which you can see paintings of them with the bulls and the crescent moon, and you've got the people in the Mediterranean islands. You've got the Mohawk Indians and people of Krishna's time who wore their hair like this as well. You've got Atlanteans suffering from a pirating that's going on, and power of Atlanteans and their superior metallurgy and Atlantean arches and pulpit and inlaid wood and rich colours being applied in tapestries and things in some of these cultures still today, that Morocco was a gateway to the New World and is, used to be a land bridge out to the islands there of Atlantis, off Essaouira, which is now only a stone outcrop, as a stone wall, still in the sea there. But Atlantean monopoly of orichalcum established colonies in the Yucatan, England, North Africa, Iberia, the Canary Islands, the Azores are just some of the places above the earth, above the water now. But yet, 2193 BC, you've got celestial bodies that wreaked havoc again, getting us going with the second sun. 608 BC. You've got the comet sea bombarding and Atlanteans going through quite a recoverness, but they're being hit in the Atlantic Ocean. You've got evidence of mining during this period of time, and Poverty Point's growth and the Indian south of this and their middens and things, all of a sudden collective middens and things coming to be. You've got native stories about the bearded mariners that came to get these shiny bones from the earth, Tunkashila, which means parent, not mother nor father, but parent, and all lasted sort of beauty until 1628 BC. Then we've got another era going on, and celestial rocks raining down fire, and seismic shock waves finally sink Atlantis more, and what's remaining above the water are smaller portions still of Atlantis. You've got Poverty Point going on, and Stonehenge continuing on until, of course, finally 1200 BC around this era. You've got everything then is vacated after this time, you see, these stone megalithic structures. But after this celestial event had its effect around 1200 BC, Atlantis was really pretty much done for. It struggled a bit, and then wars were fought against it. And after this point in history, except for smaller outposts, you've got further away older Pacific, Lemurian, Atlantean connected outposts, and you've got some remain just like islands that were sunk off Peru, even as late as the 1600s AD. But you've got much teaching forming the basis of eye awareness arising out of these ancient Atlantean teachings, which is surviving here today in this Toltec tradition, which is being passed on to you and from this authority of Cloud 2 children today. And the secret story sort of taught some Buddhists, not taught all, of course, except for the adept. But you've got a story really being passed on about geographic spots you're in, and stories really existing here of the great chieftain and tribal ancient America and ancient spiritual ways of living and teaching, you see, surviving to this day. But you've got to descend from the outside world to find this. And you've got 440 in front of your face, and it's every 5 minutes. It's like TV in a way of what it's come. But from what's not perfectly put on the outside, you can go inside now here, and you can be finding this inner peace. And you can have this law and order where this really is existing. You can find this beautiful integrated state of being where you've got this very beautiful perception, and you have a gorgeous high quality about you, and the natives call this hollow bones. But anyway, when we come back, I guess we should talk a bit more about this time frame and having hollow bones. Anyway, this is Dr. David Jubb. This is the universe inside our mind. Stay tuned for some more exciting information coming up.